been working on this fence along the gravel road for most of the summer, and now I've reached this point in the project that I've got a lot of brush and trees that have grown up along this fence line. And so to be able to get these posts in correctly and get down to this corner that I'm working my way to, it's about another 150 feet maybe. I've got to remove all of the brush and overgrowth that's gotten in here. The bottom of the woven wire fence is actually in the dirt, and tree roots have grown around it, so it's been kind of a pain. So I can usually get about 40 to 50 feet a day, which I'm only working a couple hours because I can only do that after I've taken care of Mom in the morning, and then it gives me a little time between morning and noon lunch. So anyway, what I've been doing is I've been trimming these branches off the trees, and I had been throwing them over the fence out of the pasture side, but this little section right here is right along a kind of a wash area, Wet Weather Creek, and there's really no land on that side of the fence to stack anything, so I'm starting to stack the brush on my side of the fence, which is no big deal. It's just now I've got that brush pile on this side, and we'll probably end up just leaving them there for habitat for not livestock, but for the wild animals, the game animals, rabbits. We don't have too many birds that's going to nest in it, but there should be some rabbits. So anyway, I'm now starting to clean up this section here. My plan is to get another 20 feet done today, and I'll drive a fence post, and that'll mean I got about 45 or 50 feet finished today. So I could try to keep my stacks pretty compact, and you'll see me periodically cut branches off limbs and restack them like I'm doing here. I use these loppers to do a lot of trimming on the smaller stuff because chainsaw sometimes doesn't like to cut the small stuff because it bends too much. I've got several areas that I've run across that had multifloral roses in them, and I mean, most of them are dead now, so at least they're not alive. But boy, they are spiny and they stick you, and they're just a mess to clean up. This one here that I'm going to be working on, it's been dead for several years, I'm sure, because it's pretty brittle. But you can see here I'm working on a little cedar. I end up cutting all the limbs off of them before I cut them down, just because they stack better that way. I'll pick up all these small limbs and put them on my stack. Again, I'm pretty methodical about stacking things so that they're as compact as possible. And they're also very stable that way. The wind doesn't tend to blow them all over the place. This fence along the road is about 1,800 feet long, I think, if I remember right. It was put back in, probably about 1965, so it's been in there a long time. And the woven wire, surprisingly, and the top barbed wire is also surprisingly, both of them galvanized, and galvanizing's held up really well on it. So removing the old rotted wooden posts and putting in new T-posts, steel T-posts is the way to go in this particular fence row. Some of the other fences that we've got on the farm, woven wires, long forgotten galvanizing because it is all rusted. In many places, the woven wire is actually broken and been patched. So I'm starting to work on this multi-floor rows, so I go down next to the ground and start cutting all the big stalks. Once I get them all cut, I can grab a handful of stalks and pull it apart and stack it. Again, if it was a live one, it would be much more limber and it would swing around and bite you, as I call it. I've been stuck with them thorns many times in the arms. I'm on Coumadin for blood clots, so that those thorns cause my arms to look like I've been in a fight with barbed wire. See here, I grab a handful of stalks and try to pull them free. My gloves are really broke in, but every time they get broken in, it means that they've got a bunch of holes in them, so I can't just grab the whole mess at one time because I'll stick my hands with the thorns. So I just grab a few at a time and keep myself from getting stuck too bad. You can see what a mess this thing is. Now, if these were alive, they just wouldn't pull apart like that. They'd just be a tangled mess. So in some ways, I'm glad these things are dead. There's a big pile of them. I figured out, though, once you put them in the stack, you can kind of step on the bunch of them and they'll actually snap off in little pieces. So that helps too. And no, you wouldn't be able to do this with live multiflora roses. The limbs would be all over you. After stamping on them for a little while, they're actually well broken up. Trying to trim all the trees, the smaller trees anyway, whether they're on my side of the fence or the opposite side of the fence, trim them out of that fence row. Now the bigger stuff, I'm just going to leave it there because there's really poor access to the other side of the fence. It's so grown up with trees and brush. So anything that's small and within a foot of that fence, 2 feet of that fence, anything I can reach, I'm cutting it out. And here you see I cut those smaller branches off and restack it because I try to keep those, like I said, those piles as tight as I can. There's a lot of little sprouts coming up too. Looks like most of it's hickory. There were a few oaks. I really like this little Milwaukee chainsaw. It does a good job. I mean, turn loose, it shuts off. You can just set it down. You don't have to worry about restarting it. I've got a 8 amp hour battery on it, and it'll last with this little bit of chainsaw work that I do with it. That battery lasts me 3-4 days before I have to recharge it. So it's a pretty efficient little saw. It sharpens just like any other chainsaw. I used to use a little steel, I think it was a 170. And I think it blew a hole in the piston. And I went to get it evaluated at the repair shop, and he just told me that it wasn't worth his time to repair it. So I started looking at buying another gas chainsaw, another steel, probably like a 180 or something like that. And I've got a lot of Milwaukee tools, so I'd been thinking about this chainsaw for a couple of years, so I broke down and bought it, and I'm glad I did. You kind of got to work your way into some of these cedars. The limbs are so low, and you just can't get in there to them until you've cut some of the limbs out of the way. Another little multiflora rose that I encountered. Again, chop them up, make it compact, tight. I use the loppers as much as I can. You can do pretty good sized branches with a lopper, but you can also figure out real quick that it's a lot easier to use a chainsaw. Go in here and start cutting some of these cedar limbs off. Trying to get this to where I can drive the tractor along this fence line after I get done getting everything fixed on it and keep this thing mowed down. a lot of it's on a slope, so the slope's not too bad. I think I'll be okay with the tractor. But drive that cab tractor in these wooded areas requires the limbs to be cut up pretty high. We've got the grass growing again, but I'll tell you what, you get down below 3-4 inches, I don't think there's any moisture there. And the ground is hard. Driving these T-posts, it's not like you can just hit them 6, 8, 10 times and they're in the ground. I mean, you literally drive on those posts anywhere from 25 to 35, 40 hits before you get the post in the ground as deep as it needs to go. And then, of course, here in the Ozarks, we got a lot of problems with rocks. So kind of a recap of what we're trying to get done here is there's about a 300-foot run, I guess it is, of fence that kind of really just goes through the woods, and just about every one of those wooden posts that were put in back in the 60, 65, 66, something like that. They pretty much rotted off at the ground, and the only thing holding those fence posts up are the wire and the trees that's grown up around the wire. So as I cut away the brush and stack it, I do this so that I can get the bottom of the fence out of the ground, because some of it's in the ground and roots have grown over the tops of the wire in some cases, and I've had to cut some of those out. Most of the time I can pull it, but it takes a lot of effort to do that. And then once I get a section of it cleaned up, and I'll go ahead and install a T-post to at least hold up a section. Usually what I'm doing is about every other post I put a T-post in. And I've only, if you watch me, I only take and put in 2 pieces of wire to hold the top of the woven wire fence against the T-post, and then a piece of wire on the barbed wire to hold it in place. Ultimately, when I get to the end of this run, there's a corner that's made up of 3 round, probably 6 to 8 inch round wood posts that were treated. For the most part, they're starting to pull in, so they're no longer reliable to use on the fence. So those will have to come out, and I'll drive in 3 2 7/8 inch drill stem posts, and then we'll put in X braces and a top brace and make a good strong corner, and then tie the fence back to the new corner braces, corner post. And I'll stretch the wire good and tight. And when I do that, I may have to go through and actually cut some of those wires loose. So I'm not using the tie wire. I'm just using some 12 gauge electric fence wire, because that is easy to cut with a set of side cutters. You can see as I stack this cedar limbs in here, I make sure that they're in the right place, sometimes adjusting them as necessary to keep it minimally in an area, and then also so that it is as tight as it can be. And here I am, I'm getting ready to remove the steeple that is driven in this wood post. I think there's only one in this one. And I use a set of vice grips to clamp on those steeples, and then I can just wiggle them out. Sometimes they're a little harder than just wiggling, and you got to work at them to get them out. And now I'm getting ready to put in this T-post. And again, the ground's pretty hard. You'll get an idea here pretty soon just how hard it is. Now I'm putting this T-post on the outside of the fence. So in order to do that, you'll notice I'm going to take a wooden post, set it on the outside on an angle, and brace that fence away from the T-post. Oh, this ground is so hard. I know I hit a few rocks too. They're probably none of them big, but it doesn't help to have a rock in there when the ground is as hard as it is, because you can't hardly move the rock out of the way. So the only thing you can do is you just drive them and drive them and drive them until they're set at the depth that you need them to be. Again, I just take a small piece of electric fence wire, the 12 gauge, twist it around the post and around the wire, and that holds it in place while I continue doing this cleanup. I use lineman pliers whenever I'm doing this work. It's probably not the best tool, but it cuts the wire really easy. Just about done. I got this last one to do. I just twist a little loop on the end of it so I can hook it on the wire, and then bring it around the post and around the other side of the post on the wire, and that pretty much does it all I need to do. Got the wire out of the ground and tied off to a post so cows can't push it over and get out. So we'll clean up here and Well, that would be it for the day.